So the opening is not very relevant, but there is there are some relevant positional ideas here. So we're looking for a move for black, Lula. And that's the task.
Okay, it's not a tactic though.
It doesn't look like there could be a tactic. Yeah.
Okay, so we're just looking for
best move.
Okay.
Yeah.
Best move. Okay.
Best move.
Okay.
Based on what the position needs.
Right. I feel like we need to make some kind of attempt for the center, maybe. Like these pawns are really nice for white. So if we could play, which we can't, if we could play c5, maybe soon, I would maybe quite like to try that. So I don't know if it's worth playing like yeah, no, because I was gonna say if it's worth playing like this, but then they can push. I feel like white wants to play e5 maybe at some point.
What color is their bishop, Lula?
They have a dark squared bishop.
So where do they want to put their pawn?
I know they want them on light squares. That's true. They can just play d5. But I also feel like
the downside is you're trading something long term for something temporary, right? So you get a one move attack on the queen, but on the other hand, you're giving up those light squares in the center to black's pieces. And so, of course, I mean, yeah, you can look at this move because it is an attacking move, but it doesn't trap the queen. It doesn't win material. The queen will just move away, let's say to g6. And if there is no big follow-up after that, then essentially we're going positionally astray, right? So that's definitely you want to identify your opponent's ideas correctly so you know what you're actually defending against, right? White wants to have their pawns on the light squares with this kind of bishop. So here's the thing, Lula. I'll give you a few hints.
Okay.
When our space situation is so bad, right? Because remember, just time, space, and harmony. We haven't talked about space quite as much as about time. But here it is. I mean, this is a position where clearly space is the biggest factor because we have our development we're kind of equally developed with our opponent. What's the big difference between our positions? It's really the space in the center. And so I would say you can't ever really feel very comfortable with your opponent having such a center. I would say, it's like almost like a 911 emergency. Well, I know you guys don't have 911 in England, but that's kind of like, it's that urgent. It's like a really big problem when your opponent starts having such a menacing space advantage. So you have to think more urgently about the situation, right? Like they do want to generally push their pawns to these kinds of squares, right? I would say also f5, even though this move doesn't actually directly threaten anything, is actually a very annoying move because it opens up their bishop. Then they're going to go like queen d2. They'll threaten bishop g5. Your queen will literally never be able to move again because of the threat of f6 and your king getting opened up, right? So that's what white wants, right? They just want to beat us on the space, right? At some point, your position gets so cramped in chess, and if you can't fix that problem, you go down. So we need to treat this moment like the urgent problem that it is, and really think about how to fight back against white space advantage.
So I suppose if we've identified that white doesn't ever want to play e4, then d5 could be played potentially. Okay,
so let's take a look at this, right? So when you're thinking about this move, Lula, what is the hesitation? Like, why would we not play it?
I guess only in the case where not like here it doesn't, but if in the case where it maybe damaged our pawn structure, or if closing the center was really unbearable for us. But Yeah, this just gives them a worse bishop.
Yeah, because the only thing unbearable is getting crushed on space, right? As long as we're fighting back for squares, and here we're fighting for this square basically, right? It's the F5 square. We don't care that we're losing a pawn. Obviously, that is the least of our problems if they want to take on D5 with the pawn or with the knight. I mean, their pawn structure is going to be a wreck, right? Like no one, really looks at this position and is very concerned for black, right? And you have bishops of opposite color. Your bishop is better than theirs. You got the E file. Their pawns are like the worst set of pawns. You might ever see. So that's not the kind of thing that worries us, right? So if you're not afraid of the material aspect of this move, and then you kind of look at E5 and you are like, okay, well, my queen goes there. So what's the problem? The only way this would be a problem, Lula, is if they could actually play F5, which they can't do, and they're not likely to ever be able to do, right? Like we're going to really keep an eye on that square. We could put a bishop there. I mean, we could, even I can consider the move H5 at some point in this game if I want to like take even better control over G4. I could, and I'll play this pawn to C6 to make sure my knights can move, right? But actually, this is a success for black, right? And we have to seize on this moment right now, because if you give white just one more move and white goes either D5 or F5, like imagine that pawn is on F5, right? Well, that really spoils our plans, right? Because now whenever you try to break up the center, well, this is a lot more of a poisonous move because you don't have that light square blockade anymore, right? So we really have just one move to get this in, before our opponent's pawns start becoming too dangerous for us. And if we go D5 and they go F5, it's actually an interesting move by them. That's another thing that we need to look at, because here they're threatening E5, right? And they're basically saying, okay, if you take my pawn, I go there with my knight and I try to play F6. But luckily for us, we have queen C6, or queen C6, I think is quite good. And we get the tempo on their knight. So they're not able to get an F6 here like the way they would like. Right, so we survive. So that's basically it. I mean, we've covered white's main options. None of them are too terrible for us. So therefore, D5 works. Okay. So I think the lesson is, Lula, right? Space is a big kind of advantage on the chessboard, right? If your opponent has space and you don't have clear compensation for it, like you're automatically worse, right? So there's no such thing as like, I will just keep on playing. Yeah, you can keep on playing in the worst position, but we don't want that, right? We want to try to solve our problems. So when you see that this is like a looming issue, it should be like the first thing you try to address, like how do I fight back for space? How do I undermine my opponent's space? Maybe how do I trade pieces so the space advantage doesn't matter as much? How do I get my own space, maybe in another part of the board? But there has to be some kind of strategy that we're putting up against that space advantage. All right. So I'm a big space hog. I like the space advantage. You'll rarely find me on the side that doesn't have the space. But all right, let's take a look. One more example. Okay, I think it should be here. Oh, my chess space is acting up. I just decided to close. All right, let me get back into it. So what else are you doing to train for the Olympiad, Lula?
I've been looking at quite a lot of chessball courses actually. And also, yeah, mainly the thing I was very stressed about before was openings, and I'm not as stressed about it now. Obviously, I know it's not like super important, in comparison to other things, but I was just feeling a little bit like, I guess, confused about it, and I'm feeling a lot better about it now. I was trying to play some longer games, and actually the one thing that I need to do a big, I think, focus on for the next couple of days is probably tactics.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, That's really important. And by the way, have you had any chance to practice, like did those openings come up, like either the French defense line or the Queen's Gambit accepted? I know we looked at that just a couple of days ago, but have you had those appear on games at any point?
I haven't had the French line come up yet because it's quite specific. I think I have like 2 games with Queen's Gambit accepted, but I definitely need to review the lines a couple of times before I might try and get one of my friends to practice the lines with me or something.
I'm just looking for this example. I thought I had it right here, and then I realized I don't. Give me one more second. Oh, here it is. Okay, I got it. Okay. All right, so here is this position. So we're gonna just do copy position. There we go. Black to move.
Okay.
So this was also a game of a student of mine. She was black, maybe a year or 2 ago. So what do you think about this? What do you see?
I see that we would like to improve our bishop, for sure. See that we have some dark square weaknesses around our king, but for now it's okay. We definitely have less space.
That's why our bishop's not so good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because that's the pawn, it's like, once your opponent's pawns are on your side of the board, that's when you start feeling the space problems usually.
Yeah.
What to do, Lula? Remember we said space is a big deal. And when we have that problem, if we don't change it, we have a lot of problems here because even making this bishop better is a pretty difficult proposition. And there's a c6 square the moment you take him away. There's going to be knight c6. So, you got to feel this like urgency here that you have a really big positional problem. It's not a tactical problem. There's no imminent winning move by white, but this is going in a really bad direction for us. So when we're desperate, we're willing to look at all kinds of moves that can solve our problems. So what kind of move should we focus on?
I was thinking about trying to make a pawn break.
Okay, like which one?
I first looked at e6, but then I thought that that kind of doesn't seem great.
I mean, it would be nice. So, I agree that it would be nice, kind of like theoretically, right?
Yes.
It would be a good move, but unfortunately, our opponent just
doesn't like it. So
really take back.
So I was then looking at b5.
Okay, so let's calculate that, right? Because we can't just throw that pawn away without some calculation. So go ahead and work that out, like the big lines over there.
Yeah. So I figured that after b5, and if like a takes, if they recapture, I guess if they recapture with the knight, that makes it.
So did we just lose a pawn there, or we keep going?
I'm still looking.
Okay.
Can we go b5, a takes, knight takes, bishop takes, d5, and then if like whatever we recapture with the rook.
Yeah.
Or
there you
if,
go.
Yeah. And if
really
pawn takes, then you just take the d pawn. Yeah.
Yeah, based on the fact, like a little tactic, right? Like a little tactic allows us to play an important positional move because this is our counterplay, right? This is us undermining white space on the queen side. And obviously, if they just support it like that and we get to take here, like already, this kind of pawn is going to definitely produce a lot of counterplay for us, right? So we can attack it with the rooks. We can maybe, I mean, I would say just even like this, and this type of attack on the pawn would definitely keep white busy, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And if it's not b3, and then the key line is just takes, and knight takes, where it looks at first glance like we just lost a pawn, but we didn't, because we can play on the overload of that pawn, get our bishop out, and in the end, yeah, no matter what they take with, we get this knight with quite a normal position. And we've really broken out of this bind that we were in. We improved our bishop, we opened up our rook, made our queen like have something to do. So it's an important move, you know. But you see, I think the way we find things like this, Lula, is because it's not like it's just about working out the tactics or the lines, right? It's more about knowing what to look for. You're only going to invest the time to calculate moves like that when you have a proper understanding of the position, right? Like you're going to understand that, like, oh, wow, I have like a really big problem here and it's only going to get worse if I don't address it. So what kind of moves can I do? And out of that, like, desperation, you will really put in the effort to calculate moves like b5. And okay, here we're lucky because it works, right? Yeah, somehow this rook on b8 happens to be well placed, actually, to make this move happen. Yeah, and in the game, my student did not play b5. They didn't take that chance, and they lost the game on the other side of the board where white has an open file. And I think eventually white did like f4, f5, and of course rook to e1. And white has plenty of play on that side of the board if you let them develop it. Okay, cool. So now let's do a few other kinds of problems. You said tactics, yes. So I've got something along those lines. Okay, I got some good stuff here. Now, this is a position. A couple of days ago, I was commentating on the women's speed chess championship, and it was Harika versus Vaishali. So two of the top female Indian players. They reached this position. Oh, let me just flip it. Yeah, like that. Get rid of those arrows. Okay. They reached this position where white just played the move d5. So black knight's under attack. He's protecting the queen. So the normal move for black is to trade the queens and then find some place to move away the knight, right? But black decides to do something quite fancy. And she plays knight f6. Like, she doesn't move the knight. Okay. She's just attacking the d5 pawn. However, her move does have some points. So I want you to think about first, well, so we have to start our calculation somewhere with this move, right? Like, I would suppose the obvious thing to start with is, pawn takes knight, because, okay, my opponent had their knight under attack. They didn't defend it. So, like, what happens if I take it, right? That's a starting point. Then if you discover a problem in that line, then you want to, like, go back to this position and find something stronger for white. Yes, because white does have a refutation of the move knight f6 that we want to find.
I was trying to see if after takes and trading and then taking, if there was stuff with like e7. But after rook e8, I couldn't see anything immediate. So yeah. I don't think that's I don't think that's best. If there's a refutation, I don't think it's down that line. So
yeah, you're right, Lula. If the pawn takes, queen takes, this is black's concept that they're using that pin on the pawn to get the bishop back. And yeah, you have this kind of far advanced pawn on e6, but you can't really do anything with it. Because if you push it, it gets stopped. And actually, it's pretty simple for black to round it up. They can attack it with a lot of different pieces. And black already pretty much has that pawn in the bag. So that is black's concept. Okay, so we know that taking the knight is not winning, but we do know we have a winning move here for white. So what to do? So taking the queen is not it, right? So it's not, obviously it's not a check and it's not a capture, because the only two captures are these two.
Yes.
And I mean, you can take, but clearly there's no forcing discovery on that knight. And you're just going to lose a d5 pawn. So
yeah,
that means we're looking for threats.
I was trying to see if knight c4 did anything, but I couldn't.
Yeah, unfortunately, knight c4 not
out,
forcing enough, right? There's so many things they can do. They can take with a queen. They can trade queens. They can then take the d5 pawn.
Yeah.
Black's position looks very suspicious, right? There's lots of this hanging element to it. So one thing I noticed, Lula, is like in the video, it looks like it's like black's, we're looking at it from black's perspective in the Twitch. Is that, should we flip that so like everyone? Yeah. Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
So the chat can follow along, try to think of the
no, sorry, it's just because it was black's move before, so I was still
got it.
Yeah. So I thought I was calculating that after knight g4 trades doesn't work because you can take here with a tempo.
Yeah.
So but then I thought that after king g7, I wasn't sure because you need to recapture the queen. So
right, so let's calculate that. Knight g4, queen takes g3, knight f6, king g7, pawn takes queen, and king takes knight, right? So they got, right now we're even on material, but it's our turn. So what do we do?
So we capture on e6 then.
But remember, we got our bishop here. We don't want to lose that bishop.
Oh, then can we play bishop c3?
Exactly, right? So that check at the end, you get out of the pin, and then you just win their knight, you're up a piece.
Okay.
So what else can they do on this move? It's kind of a cool discovery, I have to say, right? It's I mean, you're like, your bishop is hanging, your knight is hanging. And meanwhile, you know, they can only either take your bishop or your knight, right? So, or your queen. I mean, they can't take your knight because that was the whole point. That was a discovery. If they take here, pretty easy to refute. You just take the knight, then you take the other knight. You're going to be up a piece, or you're going to be just completely winning because that's not like a serious move by black. Yeah, so there you go. A little discovery there, Lula. Just feeling, you know, the vulnerabilities in black's position, that this is a moment where we can really go for the maximum. And in the game, by the way, it was just a blitz game, right? But white didn't find this move. She actually went down this line with pawn takes knight and then lost her advantage in the end game. All right, so let's go on to our next one. Okay, so this one, by the way, took place literally maybe a couple of hours ago.
Okay.
And this one, it's an interesting example from the game between Hans Niemann and Fabiano Caruana in the chess.com rapid championship knockouts today. So Hans Niemann was white, and he really has a very nice position here. So we gotta find the best move for white, Lula. This is a little bit like tricky. So when I say the best move, I don't mean like necessarily sacking all your pieces, but I mean, you're kind of working through like, what would you do? Although there are some really aggressive ways to go, and then there's more like positional ways to go. But the point is that white's position is good, so they have that choice. So what makes white's position good?
I feel like, well, first of all, we have more space. But also our pieces seem a little bit better coordinated. Like this knight is not very good, I don't think.
Right.
And I feel like whilst this bishop is looking at a pawn, I still feel like it's not as bad as this bishop.
Yeah.
So we also control this open file.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, I feel like these knights are quite nice here.
Mhm.
Coming over to the king side.
Yeah, I mean, also, so besides the space, besides those black pieces, I would also say the presence of this pawn here, right? The black king is just a lot more exposed than white's king. White's king
That's
doesn't have
true.
these kinds of level of weak squares. Sure, I mean, the knight is good on f4. I would say that is a good piece for black. This bishop is also an important piece for black, covering those light squares. But overall, I think king safety is also a pretty important factor here. So that's already a lot of things that we listed, right? So that's base advantage, advantage in king safety, advantage in better pieces. I mean, that's really, those things are pretty fundamental. So we must be doing very, very well here, right? I'll just tell you one little thing. We can't move our knight, right?
No, of course, because of knight e2. Yeah.
So, okay, the knight can't move. It's important to notice the one tactical idea that black has.
Yeah. I mean, when I think I saw when in the Rapid Chess Championships, not like a couple of weeks ago, a similar kind of thing where a player had weakened their king, and I think it was Richard Report who just played like knight takes and he sacked a knight, and I think it was bad, but then he equalized somehow. I think he went on to lose the game. But I was looking at knight takes to see if there was a way to break through, but then we only have a queen and a knight. And this bishop is still bad, and I don't know how we're going to get the rook over. So I wasn't sure if that was really enough.
Yeah, that's what Hans chose, right? And so it is an important line to look at. Giving up the knight for the two pawns, getting in the queen, and like something like this happened. But yeah, black has this defender by the king. The pawn also is added as a defender. The rook is nearby. And it doesn't look like the most hopeless king situation ever, right? Yeah, because you're right. This bishop and the rook aren't really playing. And I think he went knight h5. Let me just make sure he went knight h5, queen d8, rook a6, bishop e8. And basically, Caruana fought him off in this position. So eventually they drew. And yeah, like this happened, and he really lost his initiative, right? I mean, black just has a lot of defenders by the king, so hard to mate a king that has that level of defense. So what should we done? What should we have done? So we don't need to do anything that drastic is the point. That we have all these advantages, they're still going to be there. We don't have to sacrifice anything.
So
let's think about our opponent's ideas, Lula.
Okay.
So what sort of move might black want to play in this position?
So I was first of all looking if there was if we could protect this pawn in another way so that this knight could come back into the game, but I don't think that's very likely at right now. So maybe because this bishop is bad, we would want to either play c4 and try and trade it for this bishop, which is obviously doing a much better job. And yeah, I feel like after c4, you don't really want to I don't think you really want to move this bishop and have this open line to your king. So potentially c4.
Very good, Lula. I see the chat is saying in quotation marks, this is what a really good GM played, find a better move. Yeah, that's exactly the goal, guys. And she did it. That's right. C4. Kind of a simple, a simple positional move. Sometimes we just have to take the time to do these things, right? Like the opponent wants to improve that bishop. I'm not saying it's the end of the world if they do play c4. I mean, sure, the game goes on and we're still better, right? But it definitely, I think, is a good bonus for us to shut down that bishop, solidify our space in that part of the board, why not, right?
Mhm.
And just basically not rush, because the truth is black's position is quite bad for the long term, right? I mean, it's hard to even see what they can do. This knight can't move, this knight can't move. Bishop has nowhere to go, not clear what to do with this guy. You can't put the rook on the open file. Like black is almost out of normal moves here, right? Like, let's actually think, like, okay, let's say I play a move like f6. It's not very pretty, but I just thought of a nice plan here. This is a very Karpovian plan. I've seen him do this kind of stuff a lot. So what can we do here, Lula, to improve our position? So this is the kind of thing where it's like our opponent's position is bad, but then you have to improve the remaining parts of your position.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Dan says, isn't our light squared bishop also bad now? Yeah, it is, indeed. Chess is all about improving your pieces, all of them. Mm-hmm. Think about this bishop, Lula. Try to give him a better life.
I was thinking of playing bishop d1 to cover this e2 square, because the knight has because our knight is still guarding e2, and I guess that would then give our knight more potential, but our bishop is still a bit lame.
We got some good positional players in our chat. Look at that, what Gurgling Seed says there, Lula. What do you think about his idea?
I had not considered knight h2.
Do you see why he might want to do that?
Yes, so that we can bishop d1 and bishop g4.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, is this a very, very, very common kind of idea, Lula? Your bishop is bad, and yeah, to break down your opponent's position here, you're going to have to just make your pieces better, right? Mm-hmm. And so actually, I really like this move. Mm-hmm. I think it's just very thematic. This idea of knight h2, bishop g4, trading off your worst piece, getting more into those light squares looks really good. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, they can play you. There's also the point that you said that you're controlling e2, so your knight from g3 can move. Yeah, it can move. If they really try to hold us down with, like, let's say queen c8 or something, right? And they basically, don't let us play this move so easily. Well, I think we'll be able to get around this somehow, right? Like, we can even go, well, do we want to go bishop here? Queen d1, kind of provoke them to play g4. I mean, we can. We could certainly go there, provoke them to go there, and then step back, because then they lose the support for this knight, right? Which is their best piece. So that's one thing that we can do that I would probably do, actually. I mean, are there other ideas here than this? I don't really see what we can do on the A file.
No. And
I really don't like playing with bad pieces. So to me, this move is just, it's got like my confidence, Lula? Mm-hmm. Bishop d1, simple but strong. And eventually, the plan in these positions is that you just do like a long-term play against your opponent's weaknesses. And what are their weaknesses? Well, their weaknesses are these squares. That's it. These squares, light squares, are weak. They have a lot of pawns and dark squares. Pieces are bad, space advantage. And so you creep into those squares, right? Quite simple. Yeah, I mean, I do think Karpov is a good person to study for games on this theme. I could probably even find something during this lesson while you're thinking about some other position by Karpov. But for now, let's go on. So yeah, you see, Niemann kind of rushed his position too much, right? Like, the position needed a little bit of a slower approach, and he kind of went in with that sacrifice, wasn't able to break down the black king, and eventually wound up not winning. All right, so here we are. Next position, this is the game. This is the game between Aronian and his opponent Boruchovsky yesterday in the Rapid Championship. Copy position. So we're actually going to look at it from here. Okay. So it's going to be black's, from looking from black's point of view, Lula.
Okay.
Black's point of view. And things went downhill for black really, really quickly from this point.
So we need to find a move for black.
Yep, we need to find a move for black. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, they're in the middle game. So what are going to be helpful questions here, Lula? Well, a really helpful question always is, what does my opponent want? So you have to figure out what your opponent's next move is. In terms of what's going on in the position in general, well, white has the bishop pair advantage. The position is not super open yet, so you can't quite feel it being devastating. But yeah, that is their long-term advantage. In terms of pawn structure, looks pretty normal for both sides. Both sides are castle queen side, like no one's king is getting attacked. So just, try to approach this position through like, what is my opponent's idea, and then think about how to deal with it.
I didn't see like a plan for white. I thought they might just play like rook f1, but that's probably unlikely.
What's the most important part of the board, Lula?
The center.
Oh, the center. Yes.
You
always have to look at the center, right? Because things, is this a closed center? Is it fixed? Is it a fixed center?
No.
Like, not exactly, right? It's not like our previous example, the Neiman Caruana game where the center was totally locked up, right? Like here, things can still happen in the center. So what can white do in the center?
White can play d4.
Play d4, yeah, because don't they have a lot of pieces that would kind of support that move and would benefit from that move? And I
actually missed that the knight was also covering that square, and I thought that it meant trading off one of the bishops.
The bishops, yeah.
No, I missed that. But yeah, d4 actually, now that I see that you don't have to trade off the bishop, seems like it would be imminent.
Yep. And it fits white's overall strategy too, right? White has bishop pair. A person with bishop pair always wants to open the position.
Yeah.
So d4 is their threat. And then they open up the position. They open up their rook. They threaten the e5 pawn. They try to get their knight to d4 so they can threaten bishop e6. It seems really nasty, actually. Right, Lula? So this is quite critical. Like once we've identified that, we can't really sleep on this. So by the way, in the game, the Grandmaster playing black, well, admittedly, it's a 10-minute game. I never want to blame the players, when they're playing fast chess and they miss, subtle things like this. But, he played knight f6, taking his knight off the side of the board, clearly like missing this move. And that move was just devastating to his position. So in this position, he's still, he's not like losing. He is worse. We might not be able to solve like all the problems because, well, they have the bishop pair. We can't really change that, right? But we can certainly avoid like letting it get really bad. So we have to make a smart decision here that is not going to allow our position to deteriorate.
Right. So if we want to prevent d4.
Yes. So our chat is saying c5. What do you think?
c5 is a move that I wouldn't really want to play unless I absolutely had to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because it does stop d4. So I would say it's maybe better than knight f6 actually, but it's quite harmful to this bishop, isn't it?
Yeah.
Quite harmful.
For sure.
And that bishop is just going to be a really big problem for us for the whole game. So yes, it's kind of like you're going from one problem to another. We try in chess, when we're solving problems, we're trying not to create new problems for ourselves.
Yeah. So we could play knight c6. But then I guess they can still technically play.
They might still play.
Yeah,
they might even play. They might even play bishop a4, pinning us, and then going for d4, and then we're going to be in kind of that nasty pin.
Yes.
So what's the most important part of the board, Lula?
The center. I was thinking if we could play d5, but it hangs the e pawn.
It does. That one we can't do, unfortunately.
No.
Yeah.
So
the center, but the center is where we look first, right? So your
Yeah.
opponent wants to play in the center. What can you do in the center? Anything relevant that you can do? Laws says, it looks like black should make use of their half open file. Okay. Yeah. So here we go. What do you think about this capture, Lula? Doesn't it make some sense? Shouldn't we look at it? Well, first of all, it's a forcing move, right? So it's a capture. It kind of tries to open up this file. So why not at least take a look at it as a possible solution to our problem?
Yes, for sure. We should.
Right? Because as they're, as they're thinking about how to recapture, they can't play D4, right? So they have to, in each recapture has a downside. Like I'm looking at pawn takes, but that really opens up the whole F file. And I think bishop F2 could be a pretty nasty move there. Like their queen is almost trapped. Rook F2 is also a move that you would be looking at. So F takes is unlikely to be their choice. Queen takes is also kind of unlikely to be their choice. It gives you like the F5 square for the knights, right? I mean, I can't say it's like completely impossible. Like we can look at it, but I feel like Queen E4 probably not. And so that basically once they take with this pawn, it is their most natural capture, but you've actually eliminated their idea, right? But now we need one more good move, Lula, because the opponent continues having ideas. So now what's the opponent's idea? What is he? Yeah, now we have to deal with White's new threat, says possibly, probably.
Which is it F4?
F4, we've got that covered really well, right? We got 3 pieces on it. Probably not the big issue. Queen needs to step out of the pin. What pin is he talking about? Lula?
I mean, I think he's talking about this, but the bishop can't get that. Or is he? Oh no, he's talking about this one. And the rook. Okay, yeah.
Well, that's pretty notice, isn't it?
Yes, that's true. So we just move the queen, I suppose.
Where do you want to move the queen?
So it is protecting this knight. So we can either move it here, or we can counterattack that knight, I guess.
This move also has a hidden point. It's funny because it's not just a defensive move. You think about it as like I'm leaving the D file to keep my knight protected, but there's also like a hidden point of this move. What's the hidden point of that move, Lula? It prepares something useful.
Yeah, I thought it would be that we can play G5 maybe to kick the queen away.
Very good, because you're protecting your knight. And we haven't been able to play this move G5 for a long time.
Yeah.
And we would like to play it because we have some play on the king side where we have that half open file. We'd like to get those pawns going. We'd like the knight maybe to come to F4. Right. Yeah. So Queen E8 is not just a passive move. So someone is asking about knight C6. So, well, what is the downside of that move? The downside is that we are not preparing G5, right? And I would also say, from my point of view, this pin does look a little bit problematic. Right, Dan? So now, how are you getting out of that pin? You can say that maybe bishop C6, B takes C6 is not the end of the world for black, that they could take on those doubled pawns, but at the moment I'm still threatening bishop E5, right? So you still have to deal with that. So really, what was the advantage of putting the knight there, right? Yeah, so I think Queen E8 threatening G5, and black is at least, in a playable position, which is pretty good. And in the game, they definitely got into a boatload of trouble with this no prophylaxis approach of knight F6. So yeah, I think, okay, another little lesson, Lula, always look at the center. The center is the part of the board where there's like all the major action is happening there. So unless you are confident that the center is locked and like nothing further can happen, you know, everything like all these types of moves should be on the agenda, right? Especially when there's no open files yet. And that's the only way rooks are going to become better, right? If the files open up. So both sides should be looking at those opportunities. By the way, while we were going over this position, I did find something I will quickly show you because it's a classic. Remember I said Anatoly Karpov is the guy to study for that bishop d1 move. And I remembered a game that he played against Ulf Anderson. Let's just get somewhere. It was a Spanish opening. White has this kind of big space advantage, long pawn chain, but this bishop on c2 at the moment, not very good. Of course, black also has a lot of pieces that are not very good. So they keep playing like, okay, so white has made a lot of progress on the king side, actually made some nice maneuvers. I can just show you, like he took some space here. He brought in the rook. Actually, interestingly, he avoided that trade, huh? Did not want to allow black to take that knight, so he moved it away. Okay. Got the knight into the g6 outpost. So this is some interesting decisions here. He didn't want to allow a4. He just decided to completely lock up this part of the board. And even though black has the open file, I guess he doesn't really have any infiltration there. Right, so he's not going to let this bishop get captured. He moves it away, and suddenly like black's two rooks are just staring into the knight. So the knight is on an outpost, but it's not a very effective outpost. But the interesting part is what happens with this bishop. This is what we're interested, right? What do you do when you have a bad piece like a bishop with lots of pawns in its own color? Well, Karpov shows us what to do, which is don't ignore it. Do you see? Do you see what the plan is going to be, Lula?
I thought it was to try and eventually trade it off.
Yes, it is. So he's going here, right? So he still can't go there though.
Yeah.
So what's the ultimate? What is going to be the plan after this?
So we need to cover g4 more. Maybe knight f1.
Yep, knight f1. Yep, knight f1. Look at that, so funny. So much effort, right, Lula? So much effort expended on just improving your pieces. But it's, you know, why is he able to do this kind of stuff? Like, why so many long maneuvers? Because it's a closed position, right? So in this position, the center is just completely fixed, right? Like nothing's happening there. And in these kinds of close positions, there's actually a lot more room to maneuver like this. If the position was more dynamic, the center could blow up at any point. Like you would never be able to like take a knight to the back of the board, then the side of the board, then just in order to trade some piece, right? So it's very particular to the closed nature of the position.
Yeah, for sure.
And okay, so that was part one, and he managed to trade off that piece. I guess part two, maybe I would say get that knight to that square. I don't remember what happened after that, but yeah, it looks like that's what he was trying to do. That's the next, you know, once you have traded off the bishop, you've acquired the weak square, then you start just moving the pieces in there. So black tried to break out of that, but of course these squares are still going to be weak. And I guess f4 ultimately happened. Yeah. As black's pieces got stuck on the queen side, you know, white started opening up the king side. And he got rid of black's bad bishop, but he just doesn't think it's important because he thinks that with the help of this knight, the help of that pawn, the rook being here, that all the play is going to take place on the king side. And actually, Lula, the clue here is that this knight is completely unable to help black on the king side, right? So I guess this is an example, guys, of an outpost not always being good, right? And that's why a center outpost, Lula, is so much better than an outpost on the side of the board. Because look at that knight. If there was some play on the queen side, maybe he would be good. But all the plays on the other side of the board, he doesn't have any pawns to attack. And white just basically ostracizes him, initiates play on the opposite side of the board, and they're going to have an extra piece there. And so that's really the deciding factor. Now you can't even take the rook because there's checkmate.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So more checkmate ideas coming up with, rook takes e8. And yeah, I mean, look at these knights. Just, wow. Hey, that's it, so that's a pretty big idea being threatened right here. Feels like the game should be over pretty soon. Yeah, he finds a tactic, overload on g7. Okay, and it's just mopping up. All right, so yeah, you see, this is like, again, why we study classic games, right? Because like what to do with like a closed up bishop like that, right? You can see how there's this connection between the Hans game and like this old game from 1969. And yeah, that's why classics are so useful. So, all right, let's move on. Okay, I really liked this example, Lula. This came up in the Rapid Championship yesterday, and it was a really critical game between Alexei Sarana and Gadakamsky. So in this game, at some point, Black just won an exchange. So both sides were just blundering this move, like completely blundering this skewer. And Black didn't notice it first. And then white continued to blunder it. And he noticed it on the second attempt, and Black won the exchange, right? But the funny thing is, within like probably about 5 moves of this position, white was winning. He was winning here. Quite surprising, right? That like after a blunder, you still get into a winning position. So, but there are some problems with Black's position still, right? So there's the open king. He's missing a G pawn. There's bad bishop on D7. And the rooks haven't really been activated yet. So yeah, there is a lot of work to be done here. You can't really ever relax, Lula, when your king is not safe and you have bad pieces on the board. So how should Black have played this? I think, I looked at this with the computer a little bit, and he recommended like putting this rook on the C file and moving away the king prophylactically to a safer spot. And I'm just trying to play the same moves for white that white wound up playing in the game. And now, really nice move, rook e8. Why rook e8, actually? You might wonder. This might seem a little confusing. Like, why would you go there? It's not an open file. The pawn doesn't need defense. And the pawn can't really move right now. I mean, because if you play e5, there's knight d5. Well, it's a prophylactic move, actually, Lula, because one of the things that white wants to do is bring pieces over to the king side where Black's king is a little weak. So how is he going to do it? Well, he's going to do it with this type of maneuver, right? But see how well we positioned ourselves against that? Because the moment they go back, right? Remember, when knights are coming back out of the center, Lula, right? We look at the center because it's not fixed, and we actually have an opportunity to play there, and this move is super effective. Look how one rook is on this open file. The other rook is going to be on this open file. You're opening up your bishop and you're stopping your opponent's ideas. It's great. That's how Kamsky, should have played it. But in this 10-minute game, he did something different. So he played rook fc8. Rook e1, right? Because the white's not interested. I mean, white cannot actually compete for the open file being down in exchange. So you might as well just move away from all the possible trades. Kamsky goes b5. I think he's still not really catching like white's ideas, because you'll see that b5 is not going to be a useful move. Why does he step away? Because there's knight b4. I mean, you don't want to just go knight e2 and like allow knight b4 probably. So yeah, he moves back. And rook c7, another like not optimal move. And you see like white starts implementing this plan. And black really hasn't made any progress, and he's not in a very good position to play this anymore, because if he does that, it's a very big difference, right? Like now this pawn is hanging, black's rooks are totally in the wrong positions. Yeah, this is pretty bad. So it was too late to play e5. So he just did this. So do you see actually what the problem is in this game? Like like the problem with black's play over the last few moves is what?
He didn't consider his opponent's plan.
Exactly, right? Like no, there was no prophylaxis against like white's plan. Like there was no preparation for it. So he just kind of like was doing his own thing. And that's why white's position actually got, you know, significantly better. And his knight arrived on that square. And at this point, you know, it's kind of hard to neutralize that knight, right? Like there's no real play on that C file where black has made all this effort. You can't really move your knight because, like, I mean, knight e5 is going to be an idea, knight h5. So yeah, not enough prophylaxis. Okay. So, but he goes king h8, and this turns out, I mean, it's a very natural move. It's kind of hard to call that like a bad move, but it happens to be quite bad. And I think the players repeated the position here, like h4, and oh no, white just played h4, offered a draw. Yeah, this is actually a move I was thinking that white could make, but it's not the best. Better move was this, Lula. So you attack the queen. Now, why didn't he do that? Well, he didn't do it because he didn't really see the point of attacking the queen, because the queen just moves away somewhere and attacks the knight. Right? So now I want you to think about, like, what was the point for white after queen f5?
Do you have queen h6? Maybe?
Queen h6, interesting, but I guess on queen h6 they can either play queen g6, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Or rook g8. I mean, I suppose you could try to do something cute like this. It is kind of cute. I see the computer is not that impressed. Well, that's because, okay, he's not going to take my queen. If you take my queen, I think he'll be at least a little bit more impressed with my idea. I did win another pawn for white. The knights look really nice. Maybe even this is not a big deal because black will be able to maybe get that pawn. But yeah, I mean, you don't even have to take the queen, right? You can probably figure something out. There's no real threat with this move other than to this pawn. So as long as you don't like blunder some sort of check. And even this move, actually, what? Yeah, I'm blundering the check, aren't I? King there allows knight f6. Maybe the check is not such a big deal. I'm just thinking here, f6. Actually. No, f6, you're going to just trade. No, that doesn't make any sense. You just trade, take on f6. It's not the very best. How to deal with this? I mean, the question is it even a big threat? Maybe it's not. That's the whole point, right? Like maybe I can just do that. Because, yeah, like white doesn't really have a big threat, and I kind of opened up my rooks here. But yeah, queen h6, okay, it leaves black with some options here. So it is, of course, an obvious move, you know, but there's a few ways black can stop that checkmate. So there's something better. So we have to look at forcing moves here. Just any forcing move. Okay, there's no checks, there's no captures, so it's all making threats.
Yes. With our knight hanging, I'm not sure. So you can't play g4, it just hangs a pawn. You can't play rook e5 because the knight covers. And attacking the queen in any other way hangs the knight.
Yeah, well, this is in fact the winning move. So why is the winning move, Lula? It hangs the knight. Yes, that's true. However, it's still winning the game.
Because if they take, then you can if they take, then bishop f3 deflects the queen from, oh no, it's just trapped. Sorry, the knight covers the bishop. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of a nice idea. Yeah, it's a little unusual. To be honest, this one is a pretty hard one. Just to see that like you give up a full piece and that this queen has nowhere to go. And I guess yeah, it's quite powerful. And we would have the same move on queen g6. Like we're basically pushing the queen back. I mean, she doesn't really want to go all the way back to g8. And if she does, I'm sure that some move like that will be very, very painful, right? So look at those. It's actually kind of beautiful, you know, the way those three pieces are lined up on the H file. Knights on the side of the board we know are not very good, except when they are. And yeah, look, and also look at the, I see there's this beautiful symmetry, Lula, in this position between these three pieces and these three pieces. Look at that, right? So like we both have our area of strength, except the problem is that white actually is attacking on the right part of the board while black's pieces are lined up on the wrong part of the board, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, this is I mean, it's an instructive, I think, example that, you know, when there's things about your position that are kind of long-term problems, right? The king safety, this bad piece, you really have to kind of think, not just, I mean, I think that black played probably thinking that, okay, my opponent just blundered an exchange, now I'm winning, right? Now I just like put a rook on the C file and I'm gonna win, right? And it turned out not to be so simple because it was a little like it was not deep enough of a plan, you know, and he didn't really appreciate that white could bring over their knight over to the king side, and then he would have these kind of issues, right? So he needed to start thinking about that like right at this point, but it was quite tricky. All right, so now Lula, let's take a look. Last time when we talked about the Queen's Gambit accepted, you know, we said that the isolated queen pawn position is something that arises a lot from the Queen's Gambit accepted opening. So I prepared a few games that I think are pretty much like classics for these structures. Some of them do actually come out of the Queen's Gambit accepted, some of them don't. But yes, we have Anatoly Karpov. Anatoly Karpov is a protagonist in some of these games because he's had a few, you know, a few bad losses on the black side of them over the, you know, over the course of his career. So here he's playing Vasily Smyslov. This is an old game. I think it was from 1971. So you might think, well, what does this have to do with the Queen's Gambit accepted? It was something quite different, right? It started out from a symmetrical English, but nonetheless, the structure they arrive in is going to be useful for us. So here it is, isolated pawn, right? In this position, the black knight is already standing in front of the pawn, right? Supposedly on a good square here. We haven't seen black yet get the bishop out or any of his other pieces, but he's going to. So what is important here, Lula? There's a fight over this square. Typical squares for this bishop are d3 or c4, definitely not e2. That's way too passive. Smyslov chooses this one, probably because he's like, well, you don't have your knight on f6, so it seems like a good idea to target that pawn. But of course, we don't have the Greek gift here, right? There's no sacrifices here because there's a bishop guarding g5, because I remember we talked about the Greek gift in our very first lesson, right? But this is not the issue at this point. All right, so both sides have castled. Knight c6. Yeah, I'll just tell you one important little thing about this position. Of course, the ultimate goal is to get this bishop out, right? We really do want to have him on b7, but there's a little problem you have to consider, right? Like, why is b6, let's say, not a good move? I mean, it seems like so logical, right?
Because we want to take space on the queen side, and this doesn't achieve that.
Not exactly, Lula. So
Okay.
you don't have to always have your pawns on a6 and b5 in these kinds of positions. Like the main goal is to get the bishop out. Whether your pawns are on a6 and b5 or pawn on b6, it doesn't really matter so much to black. I mean, I would agree with you, probably a6 and b5 generally preferable to have a little bit more space, but way more important is just getting the bishop to the diagonal. So what is the problem? Well, the problem is that we always have to look, number one, at forcing moves, Lula. And number two, where do we always have to look?
Center.
Center. So what do we need to kind of figure out here for like what could our opponent do that could be annoying for us?
I did look briefly at bishop e4, but I thought it was okay because we can take on c3 with a temple of the queen.
We can just develop, right?
Yeah, that's all.
We can. No, we don't want to take here because in the end, then we wind up.
I meant like if there was ever a lot of pressure on the bishop.
A lot of pressure. Yeah. Here we go there, and then we try to take. Yeah. So what's a forcing move that our opponent can do?
Well, they can trade in the center.
Right. Is this move a problem for us? Because they can do it. So what would you do if they took there?
Well, I suppose if we want to retain the advantage of playing against the IQP, we'd have to take back with the queen.
Right. We would like to take with the queen because we don't really want to take with the pawn, Lula, because we've already played this move. So we've committed ourselves to that. But now with the pawn here, we definitely don't want to put the bishop to be blocked by the pawn. So, but then if you wind up developing him there, which you probably actually should try to do, this move is very harmful. Like it's extremely, you wish you could just put that pawn back and then you would have a normal position. You would be able to have knight c6 in this position. Like it's even like the knight is not so stable on c6. You have issues with the a6 square, c6 square, knight e5 coming in. So ideally in these positions, you would want to take with the queen, right? But there's a little tactical problem, which is queen c2. Right. And now they hit this pawn. And they also threaten bishop e4.
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure, how we're saving both of those things. Like, I just don't think we are. You see, Lula? So all of a sudden, like we can be doing things that make a lot of sense, but the tactics, they also have to be there, right? So that's why tactics and strategy goes hands in hand. It's not just like, I want my bishop there. It makes a lot of positional sense. And therefore, I'm going to play b6. It's like, yeah, maybe you will, or maybe you won't. You got to think about what's going to happen after you do it. There's f5. Yeah. Okay. You know what? That's a good point. Generic villain is saying, yeah, exactly. This might be the move that you got to do. Maybe not even, but yeah. Now that I look at it, it's like they're going to kick out your queen from the beautiful center. Of course, it is a very weakening move. E6 is going to be weak, and E5, G5, bishop F4 coming. Sometimes we do actually do something like this, Lula. Like we can have a pawn on F5 in these positions, but we would really want like the knight on D5. We would want the knight on the outpost, the bishop being on B7, in order to kind of have our own trumps. Like here, we don't really have those trumps, right? So yeah. So you have to be quite careful about the tactics, Lula. You can't assume that just because your knight is being well protected, that actually there's no danger to it at all. And this is why Karpov goes knight c6 first instead of b6. And now Smyslov plays a nice move, which is very typical for these positions. Okay, that wasn't the nice move I was thinking about. He does it a move later. I mean, Rookie 1 is nice too. It's fine. That sort of half open file is very typical. And yeah, why does he move the knight back? For the same reason as before, that like it always runs into this move, right? So he actually needs to step aside from the trade, which is kind of unfortunate because I mean, it does cost him a tempo, but okay, it actually is quite typical for these positions as well. And now here's the move, a3. There you go. That's the typical move I was talking about, Lula, like taking control of b4 as a square and not letting that second knight go there. And yeah, of course, the d4 pawn is a poisoned pawn. You can't take it because of the discovery in the end. So black goes b6. Okay. Bishop c2. Yeah, quite a typical plan. They're preparing the battery, and that's another reason why that pawn move is so useful. And now black has played rook c8, which looks really normal. And believe it or not, Lula, believe it or not, we're already losing. So I'm going to flip the board. And Smyslov, he didn't find this move. But I think you have a chance to find it, Lula, because when we talked about these types of positions last time, you know, I did mention that it's a very typical idea for white. It's one of the things that they look to do. So white to move and win. That's the goal. Mm-hmm. So it's like, is that good for white already? I mean, it seems surprising, doesn't it? Because like, well, what has black done wrong? Like all he's done is develop his pieces. He has literally 100% development. King is castled. You know, all the 4 minor pieces are developed. So why is it losing for black? It seems a little surprising. However, isolated queen pawn positions, Lula, are, you know, they can be very dangerous, right? The pawn structure itself, it is lending itself to a white attack. And something to do with this is, of course.
Yeah, so we would want to remove the knight from f6.
But don't forget, Lula, yeah, when you do some slow move, they're just going to play g6. Like they are not that helpless.
Yeah.
So time is going to matter. So if you're thinking like, I'm going to go there and then I'm going to trade their knights and checkmate them, that is not going to happen. It's not going to happen. They're just going to play, you know, g6 and the attack is over. You know, and if you're just going to trade pieces with them, you know, all of this is going like absolutely in the wrong direction for white because, you know, they didn't benefit from this at all. And trading pieces in black's favor. So let's go back. All right, white to move. So we're looking for a really powerful time sensitive move. So Mr. Patate has an idea for you, Lula.
With d5.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's good or not, but you might want to consider it.
Yeah, of course. It's probably the most forcing move.
Okay.
Apart from the only capture is like rook takes e6, which we don't want to do, I don't think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's the most forcing. So
so when you do this move, what's wrong with it?
Well, they can take it, can't they?
Well, they'll have to take it, right? Because if they don't take it, you're just kind of like kicking out their knight. Like you could take on e6, maybe if you want. Well, I mean, at least let's say the first question for us is not so much knight a5, right? Like the first question to us is, what if they take it? So let's say pawn takes.
Yeah. I was looking if there was any spicy rook takes e7, but I couldn't make it work.
Yeah, very close, right? So after pawn takes, you see, this is why the rook goes here in these IQP positions, Lula, because really this is a file that can be useful. And here what we do is like, I mean, yeah, the audience is like saying they don't see, you know, what happens here. Looks like we just gave away a pawn. Yeah, that's right. But this is a very typical idea. Once you've seen it once, you'll be able to like apply it much more easily in the future when you see these kinds of positions come up. So we're just threatening the knight. So threatening to take it. And now the difference is that when they block us, right, then you have this file open. So now we do that move. Now their knight on f6 is weak. They can't take back with a knight. And if they take with a queen, we win, right? Because we are using this pin, we get the knight on f6, we're gonna have 2 pieces for the rook and like a winning position. So yeah, I mean, it's funny, by the way, that Smyslov didn't do it. It is a very typical idea, and you really always want to pay attention to the square when you're playing these positions, Lula. Like it's never like, oh, they just can't go there. Like they might go there at any point. You literally, like when you're playing this as black, let me flip the board back again. You have to look at this breakthrough all the time, which is why the relatively best move in this position, although it's not going to equalize the game anyway, but the relatively best move would have been g6, right? Just and making, on d5, now at least you can take with a knight, right? So now you don't have to worry about this checkmate on h7. So it's funny, the move rook c8 looks so normal, and yet it's actually such a bad move. So yeah, they're kind of, so what do we see here that's typical, Lula? This move a3, the battery of the bishop and the queen, trying to provoke this move g6. Of course, g6, weakens, it weakens the h6 square, right? Which is sort of where white would like to be able to put their bishop in one move. It's not the end of the world, but it is kind of helpful for white. And these rooks want to go like this, d1, e1. Remember we talked about last time how it's not the c file that white wants to put the rook on, it's like the d and e files.
Yes.
All right, but Karpov did not lose like that. Let's see what happened to him. So Smyslov missed d5. He played bishop g5 instead, threatening that. g6, rook d1. I mean, it's still a really nice position, right? Like, this is still pretty much the ideal setup for white. And what's sad for us, Lula, is that we don't have that square, right? That we can't get that knight to d5. That's really what making this not so pleasant for black. So now black goes back here and offering up trades. Well, I can tell you, I really doubt, that white will want to trade and help that knight get to e7. So white avoids the trade. A little bit of an annoying pin because we don't have like the pawns on a6 and b5. Yeah, they're going to dislodge the queen. The problem is we don't have, the queen is not a great blockader. She's not like a knight.
Yeah.
So eventually they push through this move, right? So it took Smyslov a bit of time, but now we're pinned. And this pawn can't get eliminated. So it winds up getting all the way to d6, where obviously it's quite dangerous, and white wins shortly. So that was one of, that's one of Karpov's kind of bad games in this structure of the IQP, but it's not the only one. By the way, I found this game today. This game was actually not going as badly for him. I guess I'll show this one to you. It's a game Kasparov versus Karpov. All right, so it starts out from a Nimzo Indian. We'll just get to our relevant position. Okay. Okay, so here we're in the IQP. Kasparov has a rook on c1. Black goes b6, a3, bishop b7, bishop g3. Yeah, logical move. Black is trying to trade pieces. That's what you do. And Kasparov went for this break with d5. But it wasn't really the most dangerous break because, it's not like the rooks were lined up against the queen. And so I think black is just fine here. Queen went out, but I just wanted to show you one little point where the game eventually wound up right here. And something quite bad happened to black. Let's see if you can find it. Don't embarrass Karpov anymore. Yeah, I guess this is truly the Karpov's failures against the isolated pawn. Well, let me tell you something. It's just that he did have these very high profile losses in this structure that people, when a world champion loses, allowing these kinds of basic ideas, people pay attention and people learn from that. So it's really not that I'm picking on Karpov. It's just more like, let's learn from his mistakes. Look how beautifully these rooks are working together.
Yeah,
They want to take our bishop. Was this from the World Championship? Yeah, I believe this was a World Championship game in the year 1985. Wow, man, it's like ages ago, right? Almost 40 years ago.
I was trying to see if that was like queen takes d7.
Well, that's a forcing move. I guess you might want to examine that.
Yeah. And then rook e8. King h7. Bishop e4. I guess you have to play g6.
Yeah, and then what?
And then you can take the other rook on.
Yep. Yeah, he just kind of missed that problem that he was going to be losing 2 rooks here. And I think he resigned after bishop e4. I guess this position wasn't something he really wanted to look at after rook takes. I mean, the problem is like you lost 2 rooks for the queen, but also white's rooks are just pretty dominating.
Yeah.
And this rook on the 7th, so powerful, right? What can you even do to like not lose more material? I guess you have to go here. And the move that comes to my mind is rook c7. It's going to target the knight. Oh, well, why does it come to my mind? I should look at more forcing things. I know, that's embarrassing. Yeah, that's right. Just take the knight. It's like I literally wanted to go there so that I can try to win that pawn at some point. But yeah, just take the knight. Checkmate. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, okay. That one was, more like not an opening problem for Karpov, but a tactical problem. But let me show you one more opening problem. This one actually came out of the Queen's Gambit Accepted. So Karpov was black. Let's look at it from black side. Okay, so it starts out like this, but here we go. Queen's Gambit Accepted. He's playing Ulf Anderson, and this was relatively later in his career in a rapid match in 1995. So he was still the FIDE world champion back then, when there were 2 world champions. C5 castles, A6. So this is our Tabia position. So what do you remember about this position, Lula? Like, do you remember that this is sort of like our main QGA position?
Yes. We talked about a couple of different moves. We talked about a4. Talked about bishop b3. We talked about if they go into the ending by trading pawns in the center. We also talked about if they we talked a little bit about knight d2 because of the fact that if we then push, the knight can get to b3. We also just talked about, I think, ignoring it and playing knight c3, was it, that they can also do?
Yeah, they can do that. That one is maybe not so popular because of just b5, right?
Yeah.
So we would just go b5, bishop b7.
Yeah.
White played queen e2. Yeah, white played one of those ignoring us kind of moves, queen e2. And Karpov, okay. So here's the thing. I think the main move here is b5, bishop b7, right? So in general, yeah, there's no reason not to do that. But Karpov decided to go for that trade. Remember, I told you, like, my student even had a similar mistake, like taking that pawn too early and going for the isolated queen pawn a little early, right? So it is rather early to make that trade. And so white goes in with the e pawn. Can we really tell from this point on, like, why this is such a big problem, like taking that pawn early? We can't really tell. It's like, you gotta have to have a lot of experience to see why this is a mistake. But let's see what happens in the game. Bishop e7, knight c3, b5, bishop b3, bishop, okay, here, bishop b7, there we go. Okay, I'm starting to see the problem, Lula. Right, there's really, see how where that rook is going, right? Like, why is it going to d file? Because to support this kind of move, right? Do you see, like, white has a lot of pieces now controlling the d5 square?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, again, I really wish in this position, Lula, like, okay, so Karpov played knight c6, right? I think knight d7, it's going to run into the same problem. Like, I'm pretty confident that on knight d7, white's going to play d5.
Yeah.
They're not going to give us time to play knight b6, knight d5, which we would love to do, right? Like, I would be so happy if you just, gave me a little bit of time, maybe played a sort of a average move like that. I would get to do this. Did I just blunder something? No. Oh, wait. Did I? Oh, I did. I think I likely, wait, which one did I blunder? Probably d5. One of these moves I'm blundering. Either bishop takes e6 or pawn d5. Yeah, I'm blundering d5. This is it. You see, Lula, such a big idea.
Yeah.
For white. It's like, because you feel like, you're like, how can they play this move? I have like 5 pieces protecting it, right? Everything in my position is protecting that square, and yet they're able to do it anyway. Well, that's because of the tactics here. They also have 3 pieces supporting, and this pin. This pin is becoming a problem, right? That, like, when you take, let's say I take, you can take, oops.
Yeah.
And actually poor Karpov lost to something very similar like this. So he played knight c6. And he was just about to play, like, about to play knight b4, right? So white goes here. He puts the rooks on the ideal positions. So there's differences in these structures, Lula. Sometimes the queen is on e2. Sometimes the queen is on d3. Sometimes the queen's on d2, right? Sometimes the bishop is on f4. Sometimes it's on g5, right? But there's certain things that are kind of like ironclad rules, which is like white needs control over this square. So, like, for example, the knight generally is on c3. The bishop is either on this diagonal or on the other diagonal pointing at the black king, right? This knight needs to be on f3 protecting this pawn and having the possibilities of active play with knight e5, right? So those, so there's some parts that are like flexible and some parts that are fixed about these kinds of structures. So Pi is asking, doesn't bishop e6 work here? Yeah, I don't, after knight c6, it doesn't really work because, well, there's not really any threat, right? I mean, are you trying to play d5 or something? Is that the idea? It is, yeah, it is an idea, I would say. Can't be, you can't discount it, right? Like, this is definitely an idea, trying to like go and get that bishop. But probably I can give up, actually I can give up my piece and have a decent position. What if I just go here? Worst case for me. You see, like, I can't have everything I want, but I can still have a nice position, right? I can give you your piece, but chess is not just about the material. It's like, well, what does white have here in the end, right? Material is even, or even white's up a pawn. But black has quite a nice bishop pair. Actually, maybe I can try to play this a little bit better. How do I not just lose a pawn? Pretty tricky. Yeah, actually, I mean, bishop takes e6. It does look possible. You know, I can't really, at first I was kind of skeptical about this move. But the truth is, like, because of your just follow up with d5, right? Again, the rook on d1 so well positioned. It actually works. Yeah, I don't see like completely how to equalize here. That's why I was thinking about this move and just giving back a pawn, right? But getting out of that danger and having like pretty decent pieces here. Yeah, bishop e6. Yep, that's, I mean, it's an important square. That's why, you know, we would love to have a knight over here blocking that bishop. But white played rook e1. And yeah, the rook is lining up for these kinds of ideas. And black plays knight b4. And despite like all this control over d5, white still plays d5. And we can't take with a pawn, obviously. Right? And when we take with a knight, this is the tactic that we already saw. They just like all the captures. Doesn't really matter. You take with a knight or the bishop. I mean, it can be anything because you can never take with a pawn. And ultimately, they drag us into this pin where they win the piece, right? And so, well, what can we do? We know once this move happens, it's a little bit too late to start thinking about how to solve this, right, Lula? Because we're just getting like killed through the center.
Yes.
Pawn is way too powerful. Like, look at white's rooks. Look at white's rooks and compare them to black's rooks. You see the problem, right? So the bottom line is you have to be quite careful in isolated queen pawn positions. They're very useful, first of all, a very useful pawn structures to do some studying of so that you learn at least the basics, Lula, like what is the range of normal for where the pieces go for each side, right? Yeah. So that you can understand, because you're always going to get different versions of it. So sometimes black's knight is on c6. Sometimes black's knight's on b4. Sometimes it's on b6. Sometimes it's on d7, right? Sometimes it's already on d5. Like all of that is within the range of normal, right? But some ideas are basically are unchanging. The fact that this square is important is an unchanging thing. The fact that white is always thinking about pushing and black really wants to keep good control over that square and blockade it and not let white push, that's an unchanging feature of this position. That white wants to try to get an attack on black's king, that's unchanging. That there's always potential sacrifice on those squares, yes. You see, and it's really helpful to when you go into these positions to have all of that like in your mind, right, to help you play that better. Now, yeah, so if your opponent goes queen e2, Lula, I guess we should not be rushing to enter the isolated queen pawn position. Like, we're quite happy to wait on that, play something like b5 and then bishop b7, knight d7. And at some point later, you know, if there's a better opportunity to do it, sure, we can absolutely consider. You know, maybe their rook, Lula, is already going to be on d1 and they can't have their rooks perfect on e1 and d1, right? They can only have one rook on d1. The a1 rook is not as good. That could be like a sign that it's a better time for us to enter those positions, right? Yeah. Or maybe you've seen that your opponent, we saw like sometimes they make these, you know, they'll make some one random move, right? And you're like, oh, okay, well now they're not going to get a dangerous version of the IQP. That's another chance for me. So you just have to pay attention. You know, is your opponent making all the optimal moves for the IQP positions, or is he losing some time? All right, so I think that's it for the Karpov lesson. And now we got another world champion, Lula. And this guy, I think You might have heard of him, Mikhail Botvinnik.
Yes.
All right. White to move, Lula. So Mikhail Botvinnik, this is an old game. It's even more ancient than the other ones I've shown you from 1930. He was playing a guy that I think he didn't like very much. Yeah, if only Karpov could have had a lesson from Irina. But the thing is, Irina is learning from Karpov. Yeah. We should change the stream title to Humiliating Every World Champion. Yeah. I could be like the most hated person in chess. Let's see. So here we go. Yeah, it's old game. Botvinnik is white. And by the way, Botvinnik is really the player who has taught us how to play these isolated queen pawns. Because, you know, way before there was Karpov, there was Botvinnik. And especially from the white side, from the side of the person who has the isolated pawn, he has a lot of good material. And it's kind of a good idea to take a look at some of his old games to see what he introduced to our understanding of these positions. All right. So what do we have here, Lula? We have one pair of bishops has already been traded. White has just played, I guess, this move f3, actually f3 rook c8. And it's not so good that white has, you know, he trades that white has to be quite careful about. So how did this happen? He just took that bishop, yeah? Okay. Well, at least black's not completely developed, right? So that's the whole, you know, remember these essential things, Lula? Oops. Essential things are still in place. We still have control over d5. We still have our knight active. Now we're moved our queen off so we can get ready to bring the rooks in. All right, so the trade of the dark squared bishops, even though it doesn't, you know, the trade of any pieces is not really part of our strategy, but we still got some pressure on our opponent here. Ooh, and by the way, in these positions, Lula, like we also want to pay attention to rook lift ideas.
Yeah.
Because that's another big attacking idea for white. Yeah, I don't know about rook c1 and f3 also. I would say, I mean, it blocks the third rank, so I'm not so in love with that move. I would say this is not a super thematic move by Botvinnik, you know, but he was just making, you know, his first forays into playing the structure back in 1930. So I guess if I were black, I mean, my move is kind of obvious to me, isn't it? Like, it must be like this. I mean, the whole point is like to use that blockading square, right? That way you neutralize these pieces and the d5 idea. Yes, generic villain, usually the rooks want to be on d1 and e1, right? That's why I was kind of saying like, I don't know about that move. I mean, I get it, but what does it actually do? I don't really see. Could white have done something more specific? I'm not so sure, actually, because again, yeah, a pair of bishops has been traded that generally favors black. I mean, I would kind of think about that for sure. Like I mean, I can tell you that, I would think about it, but I wouldn't do it, right? Because then I would realize that, oops, I'm like blundering the exchange. So I guess I learned, I should remember the Kamsky game, right? When the bishop came out from the side like that. And yeah, I mean, I don't really want to go. Of course, I can save my exchange, but I don't really want to trade more pieces. It's completely against my strategy. So I can't even do that move. So to be honest, I'm not sure. Like, I'm not sure what white is supposed to do here. Like, where are, you know, the active ideas? I mean, you can also look at this move for sure, right? To see like if you can attack that rook before they get to play bishop b7. And like, for example, Lula, like I would, you know, this is the kind of thing I would think about. Sure. Like the changing in the center to kind of say that my knight is better than your bishop. Right. It's like a kind of a minimalistic strategy, but it's also something that we can consider. So rook c1, okay, it's like a generic, you know, move. It's funny because generic villain is asking that question. And I can say it's that rook c1 is really a generic move, just kind of bring the rook to the open file without any very specific idea. F3, and yeah, I mean, so knight d5 should definitely happen by black. But black played rook c8. And now Lula, that opens up an opportunity for white. So what did white do here?
I know that in the last game there was bishop takes e6, but here with the open diagonal, I think you can play knight takes f7, king takes, queen takes e6.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was looking for a follow-up to that.
Yeah, so if the king takes, we take with the queen, or no, we take with the bishop. Well, probably actually.
Oh yeah, you could win the.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is we're not even like in such a hurry to take that rook. It's more like about this king, right? Like, look where he is. We can't really mate him immediately, but here the computer really liked this move d5.
Okay.
Well, I can understand why. I mean, there's a lot of power to this move. Maybe that, maybe just push. I mean, black's king is, it can't even really go there because of queen c2. So how, I mean, the king problem is not getting solved here. So we don't even have to be in a rush to take this rook, right? So they took with a rook. So now we got at least 2 pawns for the 2 pieces, but I think this rook was very badly positioned, right? So in this position, yeah, I'm pretty sure we did not take because you generally don't want to take a pinned piece so quickly, right? So we're gonna milk this pin. We can always get that. So we started improving this and opening up the C file. We're also threatening this stuff. Yeah, this would all work so nicely to block up our bishop, but unfortunately, there's that. Rook e1. Yep, and the game ended with him breaking through on this square. So white's up in exchange. Okay, so it's time to resign. Yeah, it was kind of a nice idea. I mean, the point is that this knight on e5, it is an aggressive piece. And as long as this diagonal is open, Lula, you really got to pay attention to those squares, right? So even if you're not like seeing exactly how this wins, I think most players wouldn't, be calculating it out until the very, very end. Just, instinctively, yes, as a pawn march destroyer says, instinctively, this is the move that you should be looking at. And you should kind of have faith that it's very, very thematic, right? And that's why if you're playing black, Lula, if you're playing black, then try to be proactive about neutralizing your opponent's ideas, right? Really pay attention to that d5 square and how by putting the knight there, you're taking away the power from that bishop completely. And we're certainly not afraid of them trading on that square. I mean, that's all of that we welcome. We can take with a knight, we can take with the bishop. The more we trade, as long as we keep control over d5, the better our position gets. All right, so now let me see. Maybe we do one final thing. Where are your Queen's Gambit accepted games, by the way, Lula? Do you want to show me your beginnings in this opening?
Maybe not yet.
Not yet? All right.
Maybe they need a little bit of polishing first.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, we got this example. Yeah, all right. How about this one? Botvinnik Alatortsev, 1932. So what are your goals for the Olympiad, Lula? Actually, let's talk about that because that's interesting.
Sure.
What are your hopes for the tournament?
So it's a team event, so it would be nice if the team in general did well. I really don't know what to expect in terms of pairings. And like how long it will, because obviously it's a long tournament with 11 rounds. And I just wasn't sure like how long it would take to balance out and play people more like around closer to my rating. So I don't really know what's reasonable to expect. But I think it'd be nice if the team got like 50%. That would be good.
Are you guys, do you know, like, you know how in the Olympiad there's like categories, you know, A, B, C, D, E, do you know, like, and then you can try to be the top team in your category?
Yes.
Do you know like which category you guys are in?
Honestly, I'm the only rated player, so it might be the bottom one. But I was talking to Mr. Dodgy about it, and he was saying that he thinks we've got quite a good chance of going for the medal in the category.
Oh, that's good. I mean, that's a good goal. That always feels good to your category because you're competing against similar ranked teams, right? And so it's like it's hard to compete against you know, the very top teams, right? But if you know, it's good to have goals that are achievable. Yeah. And what about like maybe increasing your rating in this tournament?
I would like to gain ELO for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, because I still have a K40, so I would really like to gain rating.
So right now, is that your rating? You said it's 1536.
So it should be like 1560 in the next rating list. So it's going up, which is good.
Yeah. Very good. Okay. Let's take a look at our final example. Actually, let me do something a little more fun with you. How many of these Botfinite games can I show you? Oh, there are the fun Botfinite games, but I have another Botfinite example that is a little different. So give me a second. Yeah. Okay. Botvinnik Rogozin, 1943. Okay. Okay, here it is. We end with something kind of fun. White to move. Botvinnik is white.
Okay.
Actually, you know what I should do? I should paste it in properly so you get the right names of the players. Okay, here we are, and here. Okay, so there's been a little bit of a skirmish on the board over the last few moves. White has played this move, trying to, well, disbalance the position because Black has really two nice bishops, and if they get their queen out here, I would say Black has no real problems, although White does have a nice little pawn majority here. So knight f5, and Rogozin plays that move. Now, feels like, okay, so what was the point of that? Doesn't really do much, but he keeps going, trying to set his sights on that diagonal. Pawn takes, okay, yeah, maybe that wasn't the best move, and kind of thinking about it for Black, I'm wondering, well, actually, maybe Black could have, this is sort of the solid move. This is the active move that I would be looking at, definitely thinking about using my queen. Yeah, I'm not such a fan of this move. So he lets White capture, and obviously you can't capture back because you're going to have like a wreck of a pawn structure with queen still on the board. So Black goes queen b7. So he was really counting on this. He was thinking, okay, I'm attacking your pawn and attacking your bishop. So if you move your bishop, I get a really important pawn and I win. But then something happened that was kind of, must have been a little bit unpleasant for Rogozin.
I was trying to see if bishop e7 worked, but I don't think it does because I think they can still take on g2.
What are you saying? Lula, which one are you talking about?
I was looking to see if we could like go for this, and then it, obviously if takes, we take. But I think they can probably still capture here.
Yeah.
So don't think that works.
So they're about to take your bishop, right?
Yeah.
It's quite time sensitive. But if you move your bishop, you lose your initiative. I mean, I'm not even talking about like that you're going to lose your pawn, but you're definitely going to lose your initiative, right?
Yeah.
What can we do, Lula, that keeps the fire going? We got some ideas. Bishop takes g7, followed by queen d4, or just queen d4, or queen h5. Queen h5, I mean, I guess you're really forcing me to take your bishop, aren't you? I probably will take it. Yeah. So Botvinnik's move was quite beautiful here, Lula, because he makes all his pieces work, right? Like it's about bringing new pieces into the attack. The queen is important, but she's already kind of able to join the attack. So which white piece can we use?
So the rook on a1.
Yeah, right. You see like how powerful the idea of that rook lift is.
Yeah.
So now bishop takes g2 is not even an issue because you just go rook g3. And the key line here is, well, rook g3 is just coming. You know, you can't really play g6 and create all those holes around your dark squares, right? So he took, now check here. And now what's the key move, Lula?
Well, I want to play queen h5, but yeah.
You have to find the soft spot in black's position.
So can you play queen d4 now?
Yep. They don't have a lot of ways to defend that pawn. Right? So the maximum they can do is something like queen e7, then you take the bishop, and of course, you know, we're quite satisfied here because, you know, with heavy pieces on the board, their pawn structure is so much worse, their king safety is so much worse. Obviously, we have very good chances to win, right? So yeah, it was kind of a nice move by Botvinnik, this rook a3, right? Just like keeping the initiative going, bringing in more pieces, not stepping back, right? Lula, you got to feel that moment like, you know, we're not so interested in like trading pieces with we got to try and make that bishop on f6 work because in a way it is a powerful piece there, right? It's not like really letting black connect their pieces to the king. It can be used for the attack. So why queen d4 is not as good? Let's just think about that for a second. Well, if pawn takes rook a3, right? You want to go rook g3. I mean, pawn takes rook a3. Is that like a big difference, or is it coming out to be kind of similar? I mean, there's more black can do, or there's definitely more options for black, like even f4 you would have to kind of take a look at because you're not letting rook g3 happen. You have to like take with the queen, you get a little bit distracted. And then I might play queen b6 defend or not. The idea is I want to go there and there, so I'm not sure why that's so bad. Okay, but I see the engine bar doesn't like that move. So what can we do? Instead of queen b6. I guess I can also consider moving this rook. Oh, I see it. No, I see something really good. Yeah. It's bishop e4, isn't it? Kind of a cool idea, bringing that bishop to g6, right? And blocking that file. Yeah, I mean, so queen d4, I think just, you can sort of see that it gives black a lot more options, Lula, because you're relying on pieces that are essentially already in the game, right?
Yeah.
But with rook a3, the beauty of that is you're bringing in a completely new piece. And your queen from this position is already capable of taking part in the attack. She doesn't really need to be improved yet, but the rook definitely needs to be improved. So that's why, you know, we're getting more out of the improvements of the rook. So always, you know, kind of try to focus on using all of your pieces, Lula. You know, you got to find that moment where you can be like, wow, my pieces are powerful. Like they're really working well together. That's what we're aiming for when we play chess. That kind of feeling. Yeah. All right, Lula. So I want to wish you good luck.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Me
hope it's going to
too.
be a really good experience for you and you get to put to use like all the studying that you've been doing and just have a good experience with your team.
Thank you so much. I'm sure I'll see you there.
Yeah. Come and
Yeah.
say hello.
Yeah, of course. That would be nice.
Yeah.
Thank
All
you
right,
so
guys.
much for
Thank
the
you. Yeah,
lessons.
thank you to our audience. Hopefully it was they're also ready to get 11 out of 11 at the Olympiad.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, we'll see. You'll probably get 11. I might get like, 5 points, Lula. Yeah. But yeah, we'll see. And yeah, I'll see you guys in a few weeks. I'll be back online after Chennai.
Bye, Irina. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Bye.